Gina was sitting at the train station, drinking coffee while waiting for her train. Holding the scalding cup in her hands, she wondered to herself how life liked to joke around sometimes. It was today, February 14th, that she found herself back in this city, and as if by chance, she ran into her ex-husband. "Gina, hello." Paul's voice sounded perhaps too casual for such an unexpected meeting. "It's unexpected to see you here. How are you? Where are you now?" She answered his questions, surprised by her own smooth-sounding voice. Only once she made a slip, probably because of her confusion. She told him the city where she lived now. Paul offered to sit in a nearby pizzeria, but Gina refused, citing lack of time. And only the last question almost caught her off guard. "Don't you regret that you never forgave me then?" asked Paul, a little quieter than he had spoken before. "It's all over now. Why do you want to reopen the past?" she said, and having hastily said goodbye, got into a cab, which, in general, she did not need. She did not want to remember at all what had happened then, but memory stubbornly brought Gina back to that evening of Valentine's Day. Exactly 7 years ago, she called her husband in the afternoon and made an appointment for a romantic meeting after work in a small cafe near the house. With sincere sadness in his voice, Paul replied that he had already scheduled important meetings and that dinner would have to be postponed. Gina was not particularly upset. She understood that her husband was a busy man and a successful businessman, and yet on this day, which had become a special day for her, she wanted to be with him a little, to tell him the incredible news of which she had been dizzy since morning. After work, Gina went home by foot. She wanted to think a little about the changing future life and her new status in general. On the way home, she decided to write a flirty message to her husband, hinting that he would be surprised. She sat down on the bench and started typing. When she looked up, she suddenly saw a car, just like her husband's, parked in front of the cafe. As if in slow motion, Gina watched as Paul got out of the car, walked around, opened the passenger door and extended his hand to the charming young woman in a light, almost weightless white dress. Taking a couple of steps along the sidewalk, they, laughing, began kissing. Gina remained seated on that bench, as if chained. Strange thing, she did not think about anything at all, just sat there and watched the doors of the cafe, behind which the happy couple disappeared. Then, feeling cold, she still got up and wandered towards the house. And only stepping over the threshold of the house, which she had considered sweet home until that moment, she sat down and cried. Then there was a divorce, some quick, crumpled. Paul desperately apologized, but Gina mentally set the cross on family life and did not think about forgiveness. She just went to her hometown, stopping any communication with her ex-spouse. There was a parental apartment a couple of years before Gina's mother died. But even in her hometown, Gina did not feel at ease, so quickly selling real estate, she moved to a neighbouring state where her aunt lived, bought a pretty decent apartment, and began to get used to the new life. Gina and Paul went to school together. During the high school years, she sighed for a handsome classmate, but he didn't pay any attention to the skinny, snub-nosed girl whose only virtue was her incredibly thick and long braid. However, succumbing to the trends, the girl said goodbye to long hair, giving preference to a bob. This haircut suited her much better. The older boys and classmates began to court Gina, but she seemed to not notice their interest, still thinking only about Paul. No hope for reciprocity, Gina did not nurture. Paul was promised a great future, a prestigious university, as he studied brilliantly and had a very influential by the standards of their city parents. She was a girl from a simple family, though she had only B's and A's in her diary, but she was not very active in her studies or social life. She was just a quiet and diligent student, an ordinary student, in a word, and for this young man needed a girl with special virtues. Everyone around was sure of this. But to be fair, despite this, Paul was a really decent and responsible young man. Everything changed in the summer after graduation. It so happened that both Gina and Paul lost people close to them at about the same time. After a long illness, Gina's father died. Paul lost both parents. They crashed in their newly bought car. The whole class came to support the boy at the funeral. The classmates came up to their friend in a confused and sympathetic manner, hugged him, slapped his shoulders, which he did not pay much attention to, and only Gina, who had seen her father off a couple of weeks before, cried, leaning on Paul's shoulder. Perhaps grief brought them closer. After the funeral of his parents, Paul went to study in the capital's university, as his parents wanted. Gina went to a local college. For several years they wrote touching letters to each other, and soon Paul proposed to Gina. They got married. How happy they were then. A rented apartment, Paul's first experiences in business, his first successes, the first car, the first apartment, the first trip abroad on vacation. They lived in the same breath. They were truly one, not parting for a day. Year after year flew by like that. The couple celebrated their 10th anniversary in their native city because Gina's mother had a complicated surgery and she needed care. One day, an elderly woman asked her son-in-law why they were in no hurry to have children. "We don't really have time for that," Paul answered, but for the first time he wondered why they were really still alone. Gina was secretly worried for a long time. She understood that all this time she was not protecting from pregnancy in any way. The couple began a long period of examination, search for some new medical luminaries, each of whom convinced them of the absolute 100% reproductive health and throwing up their hands in helplessness. There are such incomprehensible cases. Convinced that nothing depends on them, husband and wife accepted this state of things, imposing a taboo on any conversation on the subject. Gina looked with painful envy at the growing children of her friends. Sometimes she caught the same looks of her husband, turned to the kids playing in the sandboxes, but she could not do anything about it. Soon, however, she managed to calm down and stop worrying about it. She was absorbed in her work, although her position as the wife of a successful businessman did not require such heroic efforts. They were already living more than well, but the world of numbers and calculations, which she loved, allowed her to distract herself from everyday life and forget about her somewhat inferiority, as it were. Then, 7 years ago, in February, Gina suddenly realized that for several days in a row she was tormented by some incomprehensible discomfort in the morning. Weakness, dizziness. She bought some of the most expensive and accurate tests. After seeing her husband off to work, she shut herself in the bathroom with trepidation. Each of the tests gave Gina 2 bright lines. There was no doubt. She was pregnant. That was the news she wanted to tell her husband at dinner, but she hid it, faced with his infidelity. Settling in after the sale of parental apartments in a new place, Gina, exactly on time, gave birth to a healthy baby girl whom she named Molly. Daughter grew up absolutely problem-free child. She slept well and ate well, got sick a little and easily, but developed beyond her age and was very sweet, her every feature resembling Paul, and only the hair, thick, long, incredibly beautiful, she inherited from her mother. From Memorize, Gina called a painfully familiar voice. "I knew I would find you here. There is no other train in your direction today. Gina shuddered and spilled her coffee on the table. A few drops got on her coat. "I didn't expect to see you again today," she said, trying to get rid of the stains with paper napkins. It was a futile exercise, so Gina, apologizing, went into the bathroom, taking her purse. She did not even remember her phone, which was on the table. After 10 minutes, having put her coat and her thoughts in relative order, Gina returned, and did not recognize Paul. He was sitting at the table, pale with trembling lips, and held her phone, which sounded a melodious ringtone. That was set to incoming from her daughter. On the screen glowed an excellent quality photo of a smiling Molly. Gina snatched the phone out of her ex-husband's hands and tried to disconnect the call, which she failed to do. Her hands trembled treacherously. After coping with the sensor, she sank dolefully into the chair across from Paul. "Daughter? I have a daughter," he said, either asking or stating the obvious. "How could you? How could you keep this from me?" Gina was silent because she was not prepared for such a conversation at all. "Gina, of course, I acted meanly, nastily then, but I punished myself, so I live alone. All these temporary girlfriends do not erase the memory of you, no matter how hard I tried." "But the daughter? Why is she growing up without a father? What did you punish her for too?" "What story did you come up for her? The father is a pilot who crashed, or a polar hero who died in the ice? Why?" Not a single word crossed Gina's mind. Not a single word that she could somehow explain herself to Paul. And only the distinct understanding that she had never been able to stop loving him during this time was growing in the woman's mind. "You can object all you want, but I'm going with you," said Paul firmly. Then he took his head reproachfully and added, softer, even tenderly, "Oh, my dear Gina." And Gina smiled. No one had called her that in a long time.